The morning fog hung thick over London as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell received the call that would change everything. Her phone buzzed at precisely 6:47 a.m., jolting her from a restless sleep. The voice on the other end belonged to Commander Hayes from Scotland Yard's Royal Protection Unit, his tone grave and urgent. "Mitchell, we need you at Belgravia immediately. There's been a situation involving the royal family that requires your expertise in stolen artifacts." Sarah had spent 15 years tracking down missing treasures and investigating art thefts across Europe. Her reputation for solving impossible cases had earned her recognition from Interpol and a direct line to the Royal Protection Services. But nothing had prepared her for what she was about to uncover. The address led her to an exclusive penthouse building in one of London's most prestigious neighborhoods. Police barriers had already been erected, and uniformed officers stood guard at every entrance. As she approached the building, Sarah noticed the unusual presence of royal guards in their traditional red uniforms, their faces stern and watchful. Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son from her first marriage, had always lived a relatively quiet life compared to other members of the extended royal family. The successful food writer and critic had purchased this penthouse 3 years earlier, using it as his private retreat away from the public eye. Neighbors described him as polite but reclusive, often seen entering and leaving at odd hours with various packages and visitors. Commander Hayes met Sarah at the building's entrance, his expression troubled. "What we're dealing with here is potentially explosive for the royal family," he explained as they walked toward the elevator. "Yesterday evening we received an anonymous tip claiming that stolen crown jewels were being stored in Parker Bowles' residence. Given the sensitivity, we had to act immediately. The tip had come through a secure hotline typically reserved for national security threats. The caller, whose voice was disguised, provided specific details about the location of certain gemstones that had been reported missing from the royal collection inventory. These weren't just any jewels. They were pieces that had belonged personally to Queen Elizabeth II, items that should have been secured in the Tower of London or Buckingham Palace. As the elevator climbed to the 20th floor, Hayes continued briefing Sarah. The Royal Protection Unit conducted a preliminary search last night under emergency protocols. What they found has left everyone baffled and concerned about the implications for the monarchy's reputation. The penthouse door stood slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of luxury furnishings and artwork. Sarah could see members of the royal guard moving carefully through the rooms, their white gloves handling evidence with extreme care. The scene felt surreal. These were the same guards who stood ceremonially outside royal residences, now conducting a criminal investigation. Inside the apartment, Sarah was struck by its opulence. Original paintings adorned the walls and antique furniture filled each room. Parker Bowles clearly had expensive tastes and the means to indulge them. But it was what the guards had discovered in the master bedroom that had prompted Sarah's urgent summons. Sergeant Williams, a 20-year veteran of the Royal Guard, approached with a sealed evidence bag. His usually stoic expression showed hints of confusion and worry. "Inspector Mitchell, we found these hidden behind a false panel in the wardrobe," he said, carefully displaying the bag's contents. Inside were 3 extraordinary pieces: a diamond tiara that sparkled even under the apartment's artificial lighting, a sapphire brooch with intricate gold settings, and a pair of emerald earrings that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Each piece was immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with the Queen's personal jewelry collection. Sarah examined the pieces through the protective plastic, her trained eye immediately noting their exceptional quality and craftsmanship. These weren't reproductions or costume jewelry. They were genuine royal artifacts worth millions of pounds. The question that troubled everyone present was how they had ended up hidden in Tom Parker Bowles' private residence. The discovery raised immediate concerns about security protocols within the royal household. How could such valuable pieces go missing without detection? Who had access to remove them from their secure locations? And most troubling of all, what was their connection to Camilla's son? Commander Hayes pulled Sarah aside as the guards continued their methodical search. "The royal family has been informed of the situation," he said quietly. "As you can imagine, they're deeply concerned about both the missing jewels and the potential scandal this could create. The timing couldn't have been worse for the monarchy. Recent years had seen various controversies affecting the royal family's public image, and the discovery of the late Queen's personal jewelry in unexpected circumstances threatened to create another damaging headline. The press would have a field day if news of this investigation leaked before the facts were established. Sarah began photographing the scene and taking detailed notes. Her experience told her that cases involving royal artifacts were never straightforward. There were always layers of complexity involving palace politics, family dynamics, and historical significance that had to be carefully navigated. As she worked, Sarah noticed other unusual items throughout the penthouse. Several rooms contained what appeared to be recently purchased security equipment, cameras, motion detectors, and a sophisticated safe that stood open and empty. Why would someone install such elaborate security measures and then leave valuable stolen items hidden behind a simple false panel? The anonymous tip that had triggered this investigation also puzzled her. Who would have known about the hidden jewelry's location? The caller had provided remarkably specific information, suggesting inside knowledge of both the theft and the hiding place. This pointed to either Parker Bowles himself or someone with intimate access to his private life. By mid-morning, word of the investigation had reached the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister's office had been briefed, and discussions were already underway about how to handle potential media inquiries. The stakes were enormous, not just for Tom Parker Bowles personally, but for the entire royal family's reputation. Sarah knew she was at the beginning of a case that would test all her skills and experience. The evidence was compelling, but the circumstances remained mysterious. As she prepared to interview witnesses and examine additional evidence, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to this story than appeared on the surface. The royal guards continued their search with military precision, treating each potential piece of evidence with the reverence typically reserved for ceremonial duties. But beneath their professional demeanor, Sarah could sense their discomfort with investigating someone connected to their ultimate authority, the royal family itself. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell spent the next several hours conducting a thorough examination of Tom Parker Bowles' penthouse, and what she discovered painted an increasingly complex picture. The apartment contained numerous inconsistencies that suggested careful planning and deliberate concealment. In the study, Sarah found financial documents that revealed Parker Bowles had made several large cash deposits over the past 6 months. Bank statements showed transactions that didn't align with his known income from food writing and television appearances. More concerning were receipts for storage unit rentals in 3 different London locations, all paid for in cash and registered under aliases. The royal guards had expanded their search to include electronic devices found throughout the apartment. Parker Bowles' personal computer contained encrypted files that would require specialist analysis, but his internet browsing history revealed extensive research into auction houses, private jewelry collectors, and international gem markets. Someone had been studying how to value and potentially sell high-end jewelry. Sergeant Williams reported another significant discovery in the apartment's basement storage area. Hidden beneath boxes of cookbooks and restaurant supplies, they found detailed photographs of various pieces from the Queen's personal jewelry collection. These weren't casual snapshots, but professional quality images that showed each piece from multiple angles, the type of documentation typically used for insurance purposes or sales catalogs. Sarah examined these photographs with growing concern. The images showed not just the 3 pieces found in the bedroom, but dozens of other items from the royal collection. Diamonds, rubies, historical brooches, and ceremonial pieces were all documented with meticulous attention to detail. The implication was clear. This was far more extensive than the theft of just 3 pieces. Commander Hayes received an urgent call from Buckingham Palace that changed the entire scope of the investigation. The Royal Collection Trust had conducted an emergency audit of the Queen's personal jewelry, following news of the discovery. Their preliminary findings were shocking. At least 27 pieces were confirmed missing, with an estimated combined value exceeding £50 million. The missing items included several pieces of enormous historical significance. Among them was the flame lily brooch, a personal favorite of Queen Elizabeth II that she had worn to countless state occasions. Also missing was the George VI sapphire cluster earrings, a wedding gift from her father that held deep sentimental value for the late monarch. As news of the expanded theft spread through the palace, security protocols went into immediate lockdown, The Royal Protection Service began conducting background checks on every member of staff who had accessed the jewelry storage areas over the past year. The investigation now involved not just the police, but MI5 agents who specialized in threats to national security. Sarah's interview with the building's concierge revealed disturbing information about Parker Bowles' recent behavior. Marcus Thompson, who had worked at the Belgravia building for 8 years, described how Parker Bowles had become increasingly secretive over the past several months. The normally friendly resident had stopped engaging in casual conversation and had requested that all deliveries be left with the front desk rather than brought directly to his apartment. More significantly, Thompson recalled seeing Parker Bowles meeting with various unidentified individuals, always in the building's underground parking garage rather than in his apartment. These meetings typically occurred late at night and involved the exchange of briefcases or small packages. Thompson had assumed these were related to Parker Bowles' food business, but the secretive nature now took on a more sinister meaning. The investigation team discovered that Parker Bowles had recently taken several unexplained trips abroad. Passport records showed visits to Switzerland, Monaco, and Dubai, all destinations known for their discreet private banking systems and luxury goods markets. Credit card statements from these trips showed expenses at high-end hotels and meetings with individuals whose identities would require international cooperation to verify. Meanwhile, the Royal Guards had located and opened the 3 storage units rented under false names. The contents were staggering. Professionally organized displays of additional royal jewelry, detailed maps of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, and sophisticated equipment for bypassing security systems. This was clearly the work of a well-organized criminal operation, not a simple opportunistic theft. In the first storage unit, investigators found a complete set of floor plans for various royal residences, including areas typically restricted to senior household staff. These documents showed detailed knowledge of security camera locations, guard rotation schedules, and the exact locations where valuable items were stored. Someone with intimate access to palace operations had provided this information. The second storage unit contained what appeared to be a mobile jewelry workshop, professional-grade tools for removing gems from their settings, chemical solutions for cleaning precious metals, and reference books for identifying and valuing antique jewelry filled the space. Most disturbing was a collection of fake documentation that could have been used to sell stolen pieces to unsuspecting collectors. Third unit held the most shocking discovery, a detailed dossier on Queen Elizabeth II's personal habits and preferences regarding her jewelry. The file contained information about which pieces she wore for specific types of occasions, when various items were typically removed from storage, and even personal anecdotes about the sentimental value of certain pieces. This level of intimate knowledge suggested involvement by someone very close to the Queen herself. As Sarah reviewed these findings, she began to understand the sophisticated nature of the operation. This wasn't a simple case of family members taking advantage of access to valuable items. The evidence pointed to a carefully planned criminal enterprise that had been developing for months, possibly years. The anonymous tip that had triggered the investigation now appeared in a different light. Rather than coming from a concerned citizen, it seemed likely that the caller was connected to the criminal operation itself. Perhaps there had been a falling out among accomplices, or someone had decided to expose the scheme for personal reasons. Commander Hayes convened an emergency briefing with senior investigators from Scotland Yard, MI5, and the Royal Protection Service. The scope of the theft and the sophisticated planning involved meant that this case had implications far beyond a simple criminal investigation. National security protocols were now in effect, and media suppression orders were being considered to prevent public panic about royal security failures. Sarah knew that her next step would be to locate and interview Tom Parker Bowles himself. He had been notably absent from his penthouse since the investigation began, and attempts to contact him through normal channels had been unsuccessful. His mobile phone was turned off, and inquiries with friends and family had yielded no information about his whereabouts. The case was rapidly evolving into one of the most significant royal scandals in decades, with implications that could damage public confidence in the monarchy's ability to protect its most treasured possessions. As Sarah prepared for the challenging interviews and investigations ahead, She realized that uncovering the truth would require navigating the complex relationships and hidden secrets within the extended royal family itself. The search for Tom Parker Bowles intensified as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell coordinated with international law enforcement agencies. His passport had been used to enter France 3 days earlier, but tracking his movements beyond that point proved challenging. French authorities confirmed he had not checked into any hotels under his real name, suggesting he was either using false documentation or staying with contacts unknown to British. Investigators. Sarah's team had begun analyzing the encrypted computer files found in Parker Bowles' apartment. The digital forensics unit at Scotland Yard worked around the clock to break through multiple layers of security software. When they finally succeeded, the contents revealed a criminal network that extended far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. The files contained correspondence with individuals across Europe who specialized in selling stolen high-value items to private collectors. These weren't street-level criminals, but sophisticated operators who had established networks for moving valuable artifacts through legitimate auction houses and private sales. The communications showed that Parker Bowles had been in contact with these individuals for over 2 years, gradually building relationships and establishing credibility within this underground market. Most disturbing was evidence that Parker Bowles had been systematically photographing and cataloging the Queen's jewelry collection during family visits to royal residences. Metadata from the photographs found in his storage unit showed they had been taken over an extended period, suggesting he had been planning this theft for much longer than initially suspected. Commander Hayes received authorization to interview members of the royal household, staff who had worked directly with Queen Elizabeth II's personal effects. These interviews would need to be conducted with extreme sensitivity, as many of these individuals had served the monarchy faithfully for decades and were devastated by the breach of trust they represented. Margaret Thornton, the Queen's former personal dresser, who had retired just 6 months earlier, provided crucial information during her interview. She recalled that Parker Bowles had shown unusual interest in the Queen's jewelry during family gatherings, often asking detailed questions about the history and significance of various pieces. At the time, she had attributed this curiosity to his role as a journalist and his appreciation for historical artifacts. More significantly, Thornton remembered several occasions when Parker Bowles had volunteered to help with organizing the Queen's personal belongings during moves between residences. These offers of assistance had seemed generous and family-minded, but now appeared to have provided him with opportunities to study security procedures and identify valuable targets. The investigation revealed that Parker Bowles had cultivated relationships with several junior members of the household staff over the past few years. These individuals, who earned modest salaries despite working in one of the world's most prestigious households, had been gradually manipulated and potentially bribed to provide information about daily routines and security procedures. Sarah interviewed James Crawford, a young valet who had worked at Buckingham Palace for 3 years. Crawford admitted, with obvious guilt and fear, that Parker Bowles had befriended him during staff social events and had gradually begun asking innocent-seeming questions about his work responsibilities. The questions had slowly become more specific, focusing on when certain areas of the palace were unattended and which staff members had access to different rooms. Crawford revealed that Parker Bowles had offered him substantial cash payments for what he called consulting work on a book about life behind the scenes in royal households. The money had been tempting for someone struggling with student loan debt and the high cost of living in London. Crawford now realized he had been unknowingly providing intelligence that enabled the theft of irreplaceable royal treasures. The Royal Protection Service discovered that similar approaches had been made to at least 6 other household staff members. In each case, Parker Bowles had presented himself as working on legitimate projects that required insider knowledge of palace operations. His credentials as an established food writer and his family connections had made these approaches seem credible and harmless. Meanwhile, international authorities had tracked Parker Bowles to a luxury hotel in Geneva, Switzerland. Swiss police conducted surveillance but did not immediately move to arrest him, hoping to identify other members of his criminal network. They observed him meeting with several individuals who were known to have connections to the international art and jewelry black market. Sarah coordinated with Interpol to monitor these meetings while building a comprehensive case against all involved parties. The investigation had expanded to include suspected criminal activity in multiple countries, requiring careful coordination between different legal systems and law enforcement agencies. The Swiss surveillance team reported that Parker Bowles appeared nervous and frequently checked his phone, suggesting he was aware that his activities were under scrutiny. He had made several calls to numbers that were traced back to legal firms specializing in international criminal defense, indicating he was preparing for potential arrest and prosecution. Back in London, the Royal Collection Trust had completed their comprehensive audit of the Queen's personal jewelry. The final tally was even worse than initially feared. 34 pieces were confirmed missing, with a total estimated value exceeding £75 million. Several of the missing items were considered irreplaceable due to their historical significance and connection to centuries of British royal history. Among the most significant missing pieces was the coronation necklace worn by Queen Victoria, a piece that had been passed down through generations of British queens. Also missing was a diamond bracelet that had belonged to Queen Mary and several brooches with direct connections to the royal family's most important historical moments. The scale of the theft prompted an emergency session of Parliament's Home Affairs Committee. Government ministers faced difficult questions about security procedures at royal residences and the vetting processes for individuals with access to valuable royal property. The scandal threatened to undermine public confidence not just in royal security, but in the government's ability to protect national treasures. Sarah's investigation revealed that the theft had been facilitated by sophisticated, inside knowledge that went beyond what Parker Bowles could have obtained through casual family visits. Someone with detailed understanding of palace security systems and procedures had provided critical information that made the thefts possible. The search of Parker Bowles's financial records revealed payments totaling over £200,000 to individuals whose identities were still being investigated. These payments had been made through a complex network of offshore accounts and shell companies designed to obscure the money trail. Financial crimes specialists were working to trace these funds and identify all recipients. As the investigation expanded, Sarah began to suspect that Parker Bowles might have been more of an organizer and facilitator than the primary mastermind behind the operation. His privileged access to royal residences and his ability to recruit inside sources had made him valuable to a larger criminal organization. But the sophisticated planning and international connections suggested involvement by more experienced criminals. The pressure on the royal family was mounting as rumors about the investigation began circulating in London's social circles. Palace officials were working desperately to control the narrative and prevent damaging speculation from reaching the public. The potential for scandal was enormous, threatening to overshadow the royal family's recent efforts to modernize their image and maintain public support. Sarah knew that the next phase of the investigation would be critical. The arrest of Parker Bowles and his associates would need to be carefully coordinated to prevent the destruction of evidence and ensure that all members of the criminal network were captured simultaneously. The stakes had never been higher for a case involving the British royal family. The coordinated international arrest operation began at precisely 6:08 a.m. GMT on a Tuesday morning. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell watched from the Scotland Yard Command Center as law enforcement agencies across 3 countries moved simultaneously to apprehend Tom Parker Bowles and his suspected accomplices. The complexity of the operation required split-second timing to prevent any members of the criminal network from destroying evidence or fleeing to countries without extradition treaties. Swiss police arrested Parker Bowles in his Geneva hotel room, finding him in possession of detailed documentation about potential buyers for the stolen royal jewelry. His laptop contained price negotiations for several of the missing pieces, with offers reaching into the millions of pounds from private collectors who specialized in acquiring items with questionable provenance. Simultaneously, French authorities raided a luxury apartment in Monaco, where they discovered a sophisticated workshop for altering stolen jewelry. The operation included equipment for removing gems from their original settings and creating new pieces that would be harder to identify. 3 individuals were arrested at this location, including a master jeweler who had previously been investigated for handling stolen goods from museum thefts. In London, the Royal Protection Service coordinated raids on 12 different locations connected to the investigation. These included storage facilities, private residences, and business premises where various aspects of the criminal operation had been conducted. The scope of the network was staggering, involving individuals from different social and economic backgrounds who had been brought together by their shared willingness to profit from theft. Sarah personally led the raid on a high-end antique shop in Kensington that had been identified as a potential front for laundering stolen goods. The shop's owner, Elena Marchetti, was a respected dealer who had built her reputation over 30 years in the business. However, the investigation revealed that she had been using her legitimate operations to provide cover for selling items that she knew had been stolen from prestigious collections. In Marchetti's private office, investigators found detailed catalogs of the missing royal jewelry along with correspondence from wealthy collectors who had expressed interest in acquiring unique pieces with royal provenance. These collectors, located in countries across the globe, were willing to pay premium prices for items that carried the mystique of royal ownership, regardless of how those items had been obtained. The most significant breakthrough came from documents found in Parker Bowles's Swiss hotel room. These revealed that the theft had been orchestrated by an individual known only as the curator, who appeared to be the mastermind behind the entire operation. The curator had extensive knowledge of royal collections not just in Britain, but across European monarchies, suggesting involvement in similar thefts that had not yet been detected. Sarah's team discovered that the curator had been planning thefts from royal collections for over 5 years, carefully studying the security procedures and identifying potential inside sources at various palaces and royal residences. Parker Bowles had been recruited specifically because of his family connections and legitimate access to areas where valuable items were stored. Intelligence gathered from the arrests revealed that several other royal collections across Europe had been targeted by the same network. Investigators in Spain, Belgium, and Denmark began conducting their own audits after being alerted to the possibility that items from their royal collections might also be missing. The criminal network had operated across international boundaries, exploiting differences in legal systems and communication gaps between law enforcement agencies. The investigation uncovered evidence that corrupt employees within various royal households had been systematically recruited to provide inside information. These individuals had been carefully selected based on their financial vulnerabilities and their access to sensitive areas. Many had been convinced that they were participating in legitimate research or documentation projects rather than criminal activity. Parker Bowles's arrest in Geneva provided a wealth of new information as he began cooperating with investigators in hopes of receiving a reduced sentence. He revealed that his initial contact with the criminal network had come through what appeared to be a legitimate approach by someone claiming to be an academic researcher, studying royal artifacts and their historical significance. The supposed researcher had gradually introduced Parker Bowles to increasingly sophisticated criminal contacts, presenting opportunities to earn substantial money through what were described as discreet consulting arrangements. By the time Parker Bowles realized the full criminal nature of the operation, he was already deeply involved and faced threats against his safety if he attempted to withdraw. Sarah learned that the curator had identified Parker Bowles as a potential asset more than 3 years earlier. Well before the actual thefts began, the cultivation process had been patient and methodical, building trust and financial dependence before revealing the true criminal objectives. This pattern had been repeated with other individuals connected to various royal households across Europe. The international scope of the investigation required unprecedented cooperation between law enforcement agencies that typically operated independently. Sarah found herself coordinating with investigators from Interpol, Europol, and national police forces from multiple countries, each bringing different legal procedures and cultural approaches to criminal investigation. Evidence from the various raids revealed that the stolen royal jewelry had been destined for private collectors in countries including Russia, China, and several Middle Eastern nations. These collectors operated in legal gray areas where questions about provenance were rarely asked and where items could effectively disappear from international tracking systems once they changed ownership. The financial investigation revealed that the criminal network had generated profits estimated at over £200 million from similar operations targeting prestigious collections across Europe. The stolen royal jewelry represented only one aspect of a much larger criminal enterprise that had been operating undetected for years. Parker Bowles provided information about planned thefts that had not yet been executed, allowing law enforcement agencies to prevent additional losses from royal and museum collections. His cooperation also revealed the identities of other insider sources who had been recruited within various prestigious institutions, leading to additional arrests and security reviews. The arrest operations produced a massive amount of evidence that required analysis by specialists in art crimes, international finance, and digital forensics. The investigation had grown to involve hundreds of law enforcement personnel across multiple countries, making it one of the largest art theft cases in modern European history. Sarah coordinated with royal household officials to begin the process of recovering and authenticating the stolen jewelry pieces. Many items had been moved between different countries multiple times, requiring careful documentation and chain of custody procedures to ensure they could be legally returned to their rightful owners. The revelations about security failures within royal households prompted immediate reviews of procedures and personnel across multiple monarchies. The case demonstrated how traditional security measures designed for conventional threats were inadequate against sophisticated criminal networks that specifically targeted insider vulnerabilities. As the full scope of the criminal network became clear, Sarah realized that this investigation would likely continue for months or even years as authorities worked to identify all participants and recover all stolen items. The case had evolved far beyond its original focus on missing royal jewelry to encompass international organized crime and systematic exploitation of cultural institutions. The identity of the curator remained the most pressing mystery, as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell coordinated the expanding international investigation. Breakthrough information came from an unexpected source when Elena Marchetti, the Kensington antique dealer, decided to cooperate with authorities in exchange for a plea agreement. Her revelations would ultimately expose one of the most sophisticated art theft operations in European history. Marchetti revealed that the curator was actually Dr. Victoria Ashworth, a respected art historian who had spent decades working with royal collections and prestigious museums across Europe. Ashworth had impeccable credentials and had authored several authoritative books on royal artifacts, making her the last person anyone would suspect of orchestrating systematic thefts from the institutions that trusted her expertise. Dr. Ashworth had used her legitimate academic credentials to gain access to royal collections, under the guise of conducting research for scholarly publications. Over the years, she had systematically studied security procedures, cataloged valuable items, and identified potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by her criminal network. Her reputation in academic circles had provided perfect cover for reconnaissance activities that appeared completely legitimate. Sarah's investigation revealed that Ashworth had begun her criminal activities nearly a decade earlier, initially stealing smaller items that were less likely to be missed from extensive royal collections. As her confidence and criminal network grew, she had graduated to targeting the most valuable and historically significant pieces, confident that her insider knowledge would allow her to avoid detection. The investigation uncovered Ashworth's sophisticated method for recruiting inside sources within royal households. She had identified employees who were experiencing financial difficulties and had approached them under the pretense of offering legitimate research opportunities. These individuals were gradually manipulated into providing increasingly sensitive information without realizing they were enabling criminal activity. Ashworth had also exploited personal relationships developed during her academic career to gain access to restricted areas of royal residences. Curators, archivists, and household staff members who had worked with her on legitimate projects had unwittingly provided information that she used to plan and execute thefts. Her betrayal of these professional relationships had devastated individuals who had trusted her completely. The Royal Protection Service discovered that Ashworth had maintained detailed files on hundreds of individuals connected to royal households across Europe. These files included personal information, financial situations, family circumstances, and psychological profiles that she had used to identify potential recruits for her criminal network. The sophistication of this intelligence Gathering operation resembled techniques used by professional espionage organizations. International authorities located Dr. Ashworth at a private villa in the Swiss Alps, where she had been coordinating the criminal network's activities while maintaining the appearance of conducting legitimate academic research. When arrested, she was found in possession of detailed plans for future thefts from royal collections in Sweden and Norway, indicating that her criminal activities had been far from concluded. Ashworth's villa contained what investigators described as a war room for art theft operations. Walls were covered with detailed maps of royal residences, photographs of valuable artifacts, and organizational charts showing the roles of various criminal associates. The level of planning and organization rivaled that of major corporate enterprises, but focused entirely on criminal objectives. The investigation revealed that Ashworth had been motivated not just by financial gain, but by a twisted sense of intellectual superiority and resentment toward the institution she served. Private journals found in her possession contained bitter complaints about what she perceived as insufficient recognition for her academic contributions and inadequate compensation for her expertise. Sarah discovered that Ashworth had justified her criminal activities by convincing herself that royal collections contained items that belonged in museums where they could be appreciated by the public rather than stored in private royal residences. This rationalization had allowed her to view herself as preserving important cultural artifacts rather than stealing them. Despite the fact that she was selling them to private collectors, the psychological profile developed by criminal behaviorists revealed that Ashworth had developed an obsessive relationship with royal artifacts that had gradually transformed from academic interest into criminal compulsion. Her intimate knowledge of these items' histories and significance had evolved into a desire to possess and control them regardless of legal or ethical constraints. Evidence from Ashworth's computers revealed that the criminal network had been planning to expand operations to target major museums and private collections beyond royal households. Lists of potential targets included some of the world's most prestigious cultural institutions, suggesting that the network posed a threat to cultural heritage preservation on an international scale. The recovery operation for stolen jewelry proved to be extraordinarily complex as items had been dispersed across multiple countries and hidden in various locations. Some pieces had already been sold to private collectors who claimed to be innocent purchasers, creating legal complications that would require years of litigation to resolve. Swiss authorities discovered a secret warehouse where Ashworth had stored items awaiting sale to international buyers. The facility contained not only the missing royal jewelry, but also artifacts that appeared to have been stolen from museums and private collections across Europe. The total value of recovered items exceeded £300 million, making this one of the largest art recovery operations in history. Several of Queen Elizabeth II's personal jewelry pieces were found in pristine condition, carefully stored in climate-controlled environments that demonstrated Ashworth's genuine appreciation for their historical and artistic value. This contradiction between her criminal actions and her obvious respect for the artifacts themselves highlighted the complex psychological motivations behind her crimes. The investigation revealed that Tom Parker Bowles had been specifically targeted by Ashworth because of his family connections and his financial vulnerabilities related to maintaining an expensive lifestyle on his journalist's income. She had studied his background extensively before making initial contact and had planned every step of his recruitment into the criminal network. Parker Bowles's cooperation with investigators proved crucial in understanding how Ashworth had manipulated various individuals within her network. His detailed accounts of their interactions revealed sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques that had been used to ensure loyalty and silence among criminal associates while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business relationships. The arrests and subsequent investigations prompted comprehensive security reviews at royal residences and major cultural institutions across Europe. New procedures were implemented to verify the credentials and motivations of researchers requesting access to valuable collections, and background checks were extended to include psychological evaluations for individuals with access to irreplaceable artifacts. The case demonstrated how traditional security measures focused on preventing external threats were inadequate against sophisticated insider threats posed by individuals with legitimate credentials and established relationships within cultural institutions. The betrayal of trust represented by Ashworth's actions had far-reaching implications for how prestigious collections would be protected in the future. As the investigation continued to uncover additional evidence and identify more members of the criminal network, Sarah realized that this case would serve as a watershed moment for art security and cultural heritage protection. The methods used by Ashworth and her associates would require fundamental changes in how valuable collections were managed and protected from those who would exploit trust and access for criminal purposes. The final phase of the investigation brought Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell face-to-face with the devastating personal consequences of Dr. Victoria Ashworth's criminal enterprise. As the last pieces of evidence were gathered and legal proceedings began, the human cost of the sophisticated theft operation became painfully clear to all involved. Tom Parker Bowles faced the prospect of significant prison time despite his cooperation with authorities. His lawyers argued that he had been manipulated and coerced into participating in activities he hadn't fully understood, but the evidence showed that he had continued his involvement, even after becoming aware of the criminal nature of the operation. The potential damage to his mother, Camilla's reputation, and the broader royal family weighed heavily in court proceedings. The most tragic casualties were the loyal household staff members who had been exploited by Ashworth's manipulation tactics. James Crawford, the young valet who had unknowingly provided crucial intelligence, faced termination from his position and possible criminal charges. His dreams of a career serving the royal family had been destroyed by his naive trust in someone he had believed was conducting legitimate research. Sarah conducted final interviews with several of these staff members, many of whom were elderly employees who had devoted their entire careers to faithful service of the crown. The betrayal they felt was profound, not just toward Ashworth and Parker Bowles, but toward themselves for failing to protect the treasures entrusted to their care. Several longtime employees requested early retirement, unable to continue working in positions where their trust had been so thoroughly violated. The recovery of Queen Elizabeth's personal jewelry became a deeply emotional process for those who had worked closely with the late monarch. Each returned piece carried not just monetary value, but irreplaceable memories of the Queen wearing them at significant moments in British history. Margaret Thornton, the Queen's former dresser, wept openly as she identified pieces she had helped the Queen select for state dinners and ceremonial occasions. The international legal proceedings proved extraordinarily complex as different countries had varying laws regarding art theft, cultural heritage protection, and international cooperation in criminal cases. Dr. Ashworth's extradition to Britain required negotiations between Swiss and British authorities, while other members of her network faced prosecution in their respective countries under different legal systems. The trial of Victoria Ashworth became one of the most closely watched legal proceedings in recent British history. Her defense team attempted to portray her as a scholar who had gradually lost perspective due to her obsessive relationship with the artifacts she studied. Psychological experts testified about the complex motivations that had driven a respected academic to become the mastermind of an international criminal enterprise. Ashworth herself remained largely unrepentant during legal proceedings, expressing more concern about the proper preservation and appreciation of the stolen artifacts than regret for her criminal actions. Her testimony revealed a worldview in which she saw herself as better qualified than royal institutions to determine the proper fate of historically significant items. The impact on the royal family extended far beyond the financial value of the stolen items. The breach of security and trust threatened public confidence in the monarchy's ability to protect cultural treasures that belonged not just to the royal family, but to the British nation as a whole. King Charles III personally met with household staff to reassure them of continued royal support despite the security failures. Sarah's final report documented systematic weaknesses in security procedures that had allowed the criminal network to operate undetected for years. The investigation revealed that traditional approaches to protecting royal collections had been designed primarily to prevent external threats rather than sophisticated insider attacks. New security protocols would need to balance accessibility for legitimate research with protection against exploitation by individuals with criminal intent. The financial investigation ultimately traced criminal proceeds totaling over £400 million generated by Ashworth's network through thefts from royal and institutional collections across Europe. However, much of this money had been hidden in offshore accounts and complex financial structures that would require years of international cooperation to fully unravel and recover. Several legitimate collectors who had unknowingly purchased stolen items faced difficult decisions about returning pieces to their rightful owners. While some cooperated voluntarily, others initiated legal challenges that would tie up recovery efforts in lengthy court proceedings. The case highlighted fundamental problems in the international art market, where questions about provenance were often inadequately investigated. The media coverage of the trial and its aftermath sparked important public discussions about cultural heritage protection and the responsibilities of institutions that hold irreplaceable artifacts. Academic and museum communities began implementing new procedures for vetting researchers and monitoring access to valuable collections, learning from the painful lessons revealed by Ashworth's betrayal. For Tom Parker Bowles, the legal resolution included a 5-year prison sentence reduced to 3 years due to his cooperation with authorities. His relationship with his family, particularly his mother Camilla, would require years to rebuild. The scandal had permanently altered his place within the extended royal family and ended any possibility of his continuing public role. Connected to royal activities, Dr. Victoria Ashworth received a 15-year prison sentence after being convicted on multiple charges, including theft, conspiracy, and money laundering. Additional charges related to her activities in other European countries would be pursued through international legal cooperation. At age 62, she would spend most of her remaining productive years in prison. Her distinguished academic career, forever overshadowed by her criminal activities. The household staff members who had been exploited by Ashworth received varying degrees of legal mercy based on their levels of awareness and cooperation. Most kept their positions after additional security training, though several chose to retire early due to the emotional trauma of their unwitting involvement in betraying institutions they had faithfully served. Sarah's career was significantly enhanced by her successful handling of this complex international case. She received commendations from multiple law enforcement agencies and was promoted to Detective Chief Inspector with specialized responsibility for art crimes affecting British cultural institutions. The experience had taught her that protecting cultural heritage required understanding both criminal psychology and the complex institutional relationships that could be exploited by sophisticated operators. The case ultimately resulted in enhanced security, cooperation between royal households, major museums, and law enforcement agencies across Europe. New protocols for background checking, monitoring researcher access, and detecting potential insider threats were implemented to prevent similar operations from succeeding in the future. Years later, as the last legal proceedings concluded and the final stolen items were returned to their rightful owners, Sarah reflected on the profound lessons learned from this investigation. The case had demonstrated that protecting irreplaceable cultural artifacts required constant vigilance against those who would exploit trust, access, and expertise for criminal purposes. The price of preserving cultural heritage for future generations would always include defending against those who saw these treasures merely as opportunities for personal gain.